what happens if there's a lot of snow? We get 12 inches of snow and it's on the solar panels. Do they stop working?
To make sure that you're getting a fair price when you're doing solar.
My life.
All your life.
All my life. And it doesn't get any cheaper.
It doesn't get any cheaper. And so when they raise rates, most likely again this fall, right? You've been there all your life. Is there a lifetime loyalty discount you're getting?
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Power Up. I'm your host, Velia Chavez. It's been a minute, but welcome back to the new season. Today I have some great information. If you've been considering getting some solar energy for your home, you can't miss watching today's podcast because today I have a special guest. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
So this is Josh, and he is an expert when it comes to solar in your home, correct? How long have you been doing solar, Josh?
Just about 5 years, so going on 5 years here in June.
You look too young to be in business for 5 years.
It's been a long journey. It hasn't all been here locally, but in the 5 years, I feel like I've learned a lot on the residential and commercial side.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you've been doing some amazing things with the solar space. So tell us a little bit about how you got into solar and why you like it so much.
So I was in college, and I had a buddy of mine that had done construction for a long time. Shout out to my friend Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
But yeah, Dylan had been doing construction for a long time, and he made a career change, and he went into the solar industry, right? And I love Dylan, but he's not the most personable guy, right? And he did very, very well right off the bat in the solar industry, right? And I go, if he can do it, I think I can do something similar, right? And so I had a conversation with Dylan, and I talked to him about like what he liked about it, what was hard about it, and things of that sort. And he shared with me that it sells itself. He's like, you pretty much have an appointment set for you. You show up to the appointment, and you explain the product and show them the savings that come with making that switch. And a lot of times, they're ready to sign up right then and there, right? And so, it didn't seem like it was a lot of salesmanship that was in there, right? It was just kind of an educational approach. Okay. And so, I made the switch, got on board with the company he was with at the time, and it was as easy as he said it was, right? Okay. And so, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so it's a product that sells itself. Solar, every day you see more and more houses have the solar panels, and it's just one of those eras that we're in where technology is it's about also making a footprint, like helping make a better world for the future, trying to save some money, trying to also take some tax breaks, and we'll talk a little bit more about the tax breaks that come with investing in a solar panel. But first I wanted to ask you some questions. I know solar is very popular, a lot of people are considering it, but not everybody is eligible, correct? Not every house is the ideal house for solar for many reasons, right? So tell us what would disqualify a home, not the buyer, but a home from being eligible for panels.
So when we talk about disqualifying, the biggest disqualifier would probably be the roof, right? If the roof isn't of a certain age, we usually like to have at least 10 years of life on it, just because at some point, especially in the Midwest, we're going to get a hailstorm, right? And the next 10 to 15 years, and you're probably going to replace your roof at that point. There's a cost associated for us to uninstall and reinstall that system for you, right? That's usually covered by your homeowner's insurance policy. But even with that said, it can be costly to do so, and so we'd prefer for that not to be an issue that you're having to deal with until 20 years down the line, right? So that's probably the biggest disqualifier. The second one would be the electrical situation in the house. If you have an outdated home that has not had an updated electrical situation there, that could be a costly upgrade that needs to take place prior to going solar, right? Now, like we talked about, there are incentives and rebates out there, right, for solar that can maybe potentially make some of those costs cheaper, right, for the homeowner. But those, I would say, are the two biggest disqualifiers for a homeowner looking to go solar.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things that we always see getting promoted or marketed when it comes to solar advertising, we see that they say you can actually get paid by the electric company if you install panels. Is that true, and how does that work?
That is not really true, right? And so it can be true though, right? Just depending on where you live, right? And so for us, depending on where you are in the states of Kansas or Missouri, there's a couple pockets, most notably the Wyandotte County pocket that is BPU, and pretty much anywhere within like a 2.5 hour radius outside of Kansas City, the majority is going to be Evergy with a couple co-ops sprinkled in there, right? And so for Evergy, those co-ops, and for BPU, and I guess IPL with independents as well, right? Those are going to be your 4 biggest utility companies that anyone that's watching today probably is dealing with one of those utility companies. Then how net metering works with those companies, you are not receiving a check in the mail for your overproduction, right? It actually doesn't benefit the homeowner to overproduce a ton on site because of the lack of compensation that comes back to you for that overproduction, right?
Okay.
And so when we're designing that system, it's important that we have no more than maybe 3 or 4 months in the year where you're overproducing, because we don't want you to, what we call, donate to your utility company, right? And so that's how we find the sweet spot on your ROI.
Okay. So one day you were telling me that something you come across a lot is that some people purchase panels, and when you go visit them, you find out that they didn't have the proper system, so they were undersold the proper paneling that they needed, or whatever you would call it. And so they do that sometimes just to kind of make it sound more attractive price-wise, but in the long run, then they're kind of short-selling the buyer. How does that work? Tell me.
Yeah, and so there's a really, I think, important tip to do when someone's purchasing solar with any company, right? I think in the states of Kansas and Missouri, Helio GreenTech, us as a company, we're members of MOSEA, which stands for Missouri Solar Energy Industries Association, and we're also members of the Clean Energy Business Council on the Kansas side, right? And so why we're members of those organizations is to maintain the integrity of the industry, but also help us grow, right? Not just us as a company, but the industry as a whole. Because we're big advocates that our competition is not ABC solar company. Our competition is when somebody does a bad job, right? Exactly. When somebody does a bad job in the industry, it leaves a stain that all of us have to deal with, right? And so if you went solar, right, on your house, when it was time for Thanksgiving, if the conversation came up and you had a bad experience, someone asked you, hey, what are your thoughts on it? You would shoot it down very quickly, right? And that would resonate with them, and the likelihood that they still follow up and look into solar is slim to none, right? But on the opposite end of that spectrum, if you tell them about how amazing an investment that was and how happy you are you did it, and you recommend that they look into it as well, they're probably very likely to go solar as well, right? And so just understanding that that's how the world works and that's how marketing works and things of that sort, as long as we're all playing by the same rules, there's enough money for everyone to be successful, all the homeowners to benefit, and for the planet to benefit as well, right? We just have to be doing it correctly. And so a good thing to make sure that you're getting a fair price when you're doing solar is to check your price per watt, right? And that's all it is dividing the size of your system by the cost you're spending, right? And then based on your market, you can look up what is the fair pricing in my market, right? And so when we see big rate hikes here locally, what happens is a lot of out-of-state companies come to our market because they see what's happening here, right, with the increased rates with Evergy. And so some of these out-of-state companies, they don't have local pricing because they don't live here. They're paying part of the price you're seeing there is the Airbnb for their teams to stay here, right? Things of that sort. And so when you see the discrepancy in price between a local company and an out-of-state player like that, it shocks people, the savings that are in there with going with a local company. But if you really dive into it, it's not hard to see why those savings are there, right? There's just a lot less overhead for us here locally than someone coming and trying to take over our territory.
That makes a lot of sense, because you don't think about that. You think, oh, they're selling the same product, but there's additional expenses that have to be covered, and someone has to pay for it. So either they take a cut in their profit, or they pass
it on.
Cost, to the
absolutely.
buyer. Okay, so now another thing, since you were talking about how some companies or some salespeople give solar a bad name, let's get into the little tax situation.
Okay.
I know, as a tax preparer myself, this year I had a lot of people that called me that were a little bit upset. They didn't consult with me prior to buying. They went to a different tax preparer, and when they realized that they were not getting a big check, they were not happy, and they were trying to get me to figure it out for them. And I was like, well, it doesn't work that way. What happens is, not everybody qualifies for the credits. There are credits available, but usually they're credits, they're not refunds. And some people are under the impression that they're going to get a big $13,000, $15,000 refund from the IRS. So people, if it sounds too good to be true, chances are it is too good to be true. If you typically don't have to pay a lot of money to offset the cost, then you probably won't have that benefit. There's many other benefits to solar panel, but don't purchase a solar panel system just because you think you are going to get, or that you're outsmarting the government, and so you're gonna basically get your solar panels for free. That's not how it works. So before you do dive in to investing into a solar panel system, talk to your tax advisor, because
Absolutely.
each situation is different. Some people may see those huge savings on their tax bill because typically they do have a liability. They may have to pay $10,000-$15,000, but also keep in mind that some of the credits are income based. So once you hit a certain amount of income, you may completely phase yourself out from those credits. So just talk to your tax advisor to consult with them to make sure that this is going to have the tax savings you are looking for, if that's the only reason why you are looking to buy solar panels. Now let's talk about all the other benefits that come along besides tax benefits for those who qualify.
Yes, yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That is probably where most people get themselves in trouble, right? On the sales side, is they misrepresent that tax credit, right? And so it leaves you, unfortunately, in a sticky situation when you're sitting there with an angry customer that feels like they've been lied to, right? And so, yeah, the best way to combat that is, like she said, talk to your tax advisor, make sure that you guys are on the same page there. But at the end of the day, you should not be going solar strictly because of that tax credit, right?
Exactly.
There should be other additional reasons. That should be kind of the cherry on top, if you will, to the whole process.
Okay.
So in addition to the tax savings and credits, we also know that there are many other benefits to installing a solar panel system in your home, correct? So tell us, what are some of those benefits and what are some of the most popular ones, why you see that people choose to make this decision?
So with solar, I think the biggest benefit is going to be the savings. I think that's where most people are in it for, right? I think there are a handful of those fortunate enough that just want to do it for the planet, right, and for the green aspect of things. But the general consensus is that most folks that are looking to go solar, they're concerned about a different type of green, right? And if it's not going to save them money, it's not something they're willing to make that investment into, right? And so the immediate savings isn't very substantial, to just be quite honest with most folks, right? If you're looking to slice your electric bill in half, that's not going to happen with solar, right? But what can happen, and I think is even more important than the immediate savings of slicing your bill in half, is what you're doing is you're locking in the cost of your utilities in your home for the foreseeable future, right? And so we understand how inflation works as a society, right? Things generally don't get cheaper; they get more expensive throughout time. And when you look at the landscape of the electrical situation from our utility companies and the infrastructure and how outdated that is, there are a lot of upgrades that are going to be coming in the upcoming years that have already been announced by Evergy and on some of the other utility companies here locally that are going to increase the cost for consumers, right? And so if you're looking to protect yourself from that inflation, this is a way to combat that, right? And so not only are you getting potentially some immediate savings, you're getting long-term savings, you're getting the peace of mind of knowing that you're protected from inflation, you're also helping the planet out simultaneously, and you're doing all of this by simply redirecting a bill that you currently have into a better, more economical situation.
So then the goal is long-term savings, right? So let's say you tend to be someone who's on a fixed income, who you currently are able to afford, but you know that your fixed income does not keep up with the rate of inflation. So then you're looking for ways to protect yourself 5, 6, 7 years down the road. And that makes perfect sense. Also, I wanted to contribute to that because I think it's also important to consider that if you're going to install it in your home, that you're also considering living in that house long term, or that you have some equity built into that house already. And this is the reason why, because most of you know, I know that I'm also in real estate, and I've also had to deal with a couple of homes that have the solar panels. Those solar panels tend to have a separate loan attached to them. And so when you sell your house, you want to be able to have it to work, because when the bank appraises your house, they're only going to appraise it for what it's worth, correct? So you want to make sure you have enough equity so that when you sell your house, you're able to cover those solar panels, and you're able to pay those off with the sale of your home. Because I've seen it where we were trying to get a house, the seller did not have enough equity in the house, Luckily, my buyer had enough credit and enough income to be able to assume the loan for the panels, and so they were able to afford it. But not everyone is in that
So
situation.
they just took over the payment, correct?
Right,
For the
yeah.
system? Yeah. That's the way that we recommend most folks do it, right? Like you said, not everyone's going to be eligible for that, right? Based on their DTI situation and things like that sort. But chances are, if they're able to pass a credit check to purchase the home, they're probably able to pass the credit check to assume the solar system, right? And at that point, it's just, instead of calling Evergy to say, hey, I'm the new homeowner, let's hook up my power, you're doing that same thing with your solar company,
Yeah.
right? And it's just, one is, again, at that fixed cost that you're no longer worried about that price rising on you. The other one, you're essentially renting into like a bottomless money pit, right?
Yeah.
With no end date. I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest part there, is that you could live in your house for the next 25 years. You have no idea how much you're going to spend over the next 25 years on utilities in that house, right?
Correct.
And so with solar, it's the exact same thing. We're showing you it's a finite of power being produced, right? It's not unlimited energy by any means for a homeowner, right? Where it's based on your energy profile in the house, but we're sizing that to your needs, and to where that portion of your utility bill, depending on your roof size, it could be your full bill, it could be 70% of your bill, but whatever portion and percentage that is, there's an end date associated with that now, right? When this number is hit, and this, if it's a loan, is paid off, that portion of your utility bill is gone, right? And that's not something you have a luxury of doing with your utility company.
Right.
How long have you been in the BPU area?
All my life.
All your life.
All my life, and it doesn't get any cheaper.
It doesn't get any cheaper. And so when they raise rates, most likely again this fall, right? You've been there all your life. Is there a lifetime loyalty discount you're getting? Are you are you getting opted out of the
No.
next rate hike? You're not, right? And so I think there's no loyalty owed to the utility company. And so all we offer is a second solution. And if that solution is better for your family's needs than the current option, I recommend that you take it, right? But it's not better for everybody, right? But I
Right.
think it is worth looking into, because if you are one of the few that it does benefit, take advantage of it. It is not a luxury expense. I think that's a big misconception, is people think that you have to be one of the rich and fortunate to be able to afford it. That is the biggest misconception. There is no out-of-pocket costs. 90% of all our transactions are done through financing, right? Where folks are just redirecting, again, how the money's being spent on a monthly basis. You don't prepay your electric bill, right? You're able to pay cash for the source if you want, but you don't prepay your electric bill. I wouldn't recommend prepaying your solar system, right? Finance it.
Right. So then you guys are able to connect the buyer with the financing, and you guys are able to tie that up so they don't have to go out and come up with the cash all at once, or they don't have to go refinance their house or anything. You guys help them set up the financing.
Absolutely. No, we have some incredible finance partners, and depending on where the credit score is for the homeowner, there's options that have zero. Are you familiar with what a dealer fee is?
Yes.
Yeah, right. And so we have financing options that have 0% dealer fees, and so you're financing at the cash price. There is no hidden cost in there. Also, if you would like a lower interest rate, you have the flexibility of buying down points the same way you would on the mortgage side, right? And so there's a lot of flexibility with the financing options, where there's even financing options that are actually better than cash, depending on the homeowner situation, right?
Okay. So I have a question. Solar panels, is there different types? Do you guys only work with a certain style? Do they go up? Do they become outdated? Do you need to upgrade them at some point? How does that work?
So there are definitely different types of solar panels. The one we use are going to be bifacial panels, right? And so all that means is if there was one sitting between us right now, we would still be able to see each other, even very slightly, but it's because it's kind of a see-through layer. What it's doing is the sunlight is bouncing through that panel, and then the reflection is bouncing power back through it. So it's collecting sunlight twice, right? And so that's the most efficient panel that we have today. And the reason why we use all the equipment we use is I mentioned Mosaic earlier, right? And so being a member of that organization, they have custom designed equipment specifically for us here in the Midwest. So we have things like a thicker back sheet in our panels, and that's for the extra hail we see here in the Midwest. If we were out on the West Coast in California, Arizona, we'd probably be using a higher heat resistance panel as opposed to a panel that functions good in both climates, high heat and low cold, right? And so very versatile system. With all that being said, we are panel agnostic though. And so if a homeowner has a specific panel in mind that they've done a bunch of research on and they go, this is the only panel I'll go forward with, we're happy to plug that panel in, but we do provide our professional recommendation on equipment, but we're not tied to that.
Okay, so you guys have selection of materials that you guys can work with. It doesn't have to be one specific brand that they use.
Yeah, we work with the largest distributor in the Midwest, and so if there's a panel like that you're interested in, we can get our hands on it, and it's probably going to be the same price point as what we're recommending to you. But I think it's going to be very hard to beat the panel that we use. Is going to be a VSUN 440, and that comes with a 30-year warranty on that panel, which is incredible, right? And so I think you're going to have a hard time beating that panel.
And so that's an included warranty. You don't have to buy an additional one like when you buy a car that they tell you to buy it.
No, that is all included there. And so on the inverter side, on the panels, on the roof, and the workmanship, the entire across the board, everything would be 25 years. Aside from the panel would be 30 years.
Okay. So you mentioned weather. That's important to know because here in Kansas City, we have crazy weather. So how does the weather impact? If we have a power outage, do the panels work? Is there a backup system, or how does that work?
It's a really good question. And so that's another big misconception when it comes to solar, right? Is folks, look outside and they go, hey, the sun's out, my panels are on my roof, they should be collecting power. Doesn't matter if the grid's down, I should still have power in my house, right? And unfortunately, that is not the way it works for the protection of the utility company and the line workers, right? And so how a solar system produces power is the panels are either on your roof or in the yard, right? And generally how we design the system is you're constantly overproducing power throughout the day. That excess energy gets sent to the grid, and at nighttime, you guys kind of pull from the credit bank you built up with your utility company during the day, right?
Okay.
So what that means is at any given point during the day, very rarely, if ever, are you going to consume all the power the system is creating instantaneously, right? And so that excess energy there that's sent to the grid, if the grid goes down, there's a power outage, a tree falls on your power line, and you lose power to your house. When Evergy goes out there, BPU goes out there to service that power outage, if your solar system is still producing power, that excess energy is being sent to the grid. It is going to create a big hazard for those line workers, right? And so because of that, in city regulations and permitting and codes of that sort, we have to by law shut down the solar system.
So if the power is out, you're out.
And now if you have a battery on your system, that is how you bypass that, right? Because now the energy is able to stay in that battery. Your system's able to produce power and still function normally. And so when folks look into solar, if you're looking to save money, standalone solar is the way to go, right? If you're looking for an insurance policy, right, on that solar system, then you could add a battery to there, right? But that battery is not going to make your system cheaper, more efficient, right, or more economical. It's just simply an insurance policy for when we have a power outage, right, and things of that sort, right? And so that's important to keep in mind. Is a lot of people want a battery going into it, but their biggest goal is to save money, right? We can't check that box and have a battery, right?
Okay.
So you need to decide what's more important to you. Is it the peace of mind of having that power outage protection, or is it saving the most money possible here, right?
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, now speaking of weather also, what happens if there's a lot of snow? We get 12 inches of snow and it's on the solar panels. Do they stop working?
Yes, the panels will not produce power while they're covered in snow, right? Nice thing is usually if they're on your roof, they're at a nice slope already, and the panels being nice matte black, catches the sun's eye pretty quick, right? And so they do melt. Doesn't take very long for them to melt, but as far as if they're covered, they will not be producing power for you. Now, like cloudy days, right? There's days that obviously that are more cloudy than others. Just how we can get a sunburn on a cloudy day, your panels are still producing power under cloudy climate, right? It's just not going to be as efficient as a 95-degree summer day for you, right?
Perfect.
But if they are covered in snow, they will not be producing power.
So how do you maintain solar panels? Do you have to hire a company to come out and clean them every month, every year? How does that work?
So my first couple years in solar, I was in Arizona, right? And so the University of Arizona, they have a campus. Of course they have a campus, but they have a solar farm out there on their campus, right? And so it's just a massive array of solar panels. What they did is they split that farm in half, and half of it they cleaned on a weekly basis for a calendar year. The other half they did not clean for that entire calendar year. They found that at the end of that year, the cost of the water to clean that one half did not make up for the added efficiency on those panels, right? And so I share that with folks to let them know there is not a whole lot of maintenance that goes into solar, besides aesthetics, right? If you find yourself with the hose in your hand in your yard and you see that there's dust or poop on your panels, feel free to spray it down if you'd like, right? But don't go out of your way to climb on your roof and try to clean your panels, because when someone goes solar, they have an app that tracks their production on their phone. If you look at that production before you got on your roof and after you spend an hour on your roof, you're going to be real mad you spent that hour on your roof, right? You're not going to get any added benefit really from that.
So Mother Nature does its job with the rain and the wind. It kind of keeps it clear.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Awesome.
Maybe every 5 or 6 years you could have a little power, someone come out there and do
Power
a professional
washing.
cleaning on your panels. But aside from that, not something you need to worry about on an annual basis.
Okay. I don't remember if you mentioned this earlier in our conversation. I'm getting old. I forget things. But how important is it to have a house that's free and clear of trees around it?
Super important, right? It's kind of funny sometimes how often someone sets a consultation and we get out to the site and I see it before I show up, right? I see the trees and I go, well, you know what, maybe the trees have been cut down, or maybe they're thinking about cutting the trees down. And so we'll show up and we'll have the conversation with them. And before we sit down, I know it's going to be a very quick conversation, likely, right? If they're not willing to cut these trees down. And so go really quickly, thank you guys for having me out. Out of curiosity, what are our thoughts on the trees out front? Is that something we're considering cutting down for solar? Is it something? Absolutely not. I'm doing this for the planet. I don't want to do it. I can't do this for the planet if I'm cutting down trees, right? Well, your panels are not going to get any sunlight if they're sitting under this 40-foot oak tree, right? And so you absolutely want to limit the shading on your system. It's not that they can't produce power with the shading, right? But it's going to be harder to save money. You're just hurting yourself by having those trees there, right? Also, for the tax credit, we're concerned, right? You can bundle in those tree savings if it's your solar company that's coming out and doing that removal for you, right? That'll be on your solar contract.
Oh, so you guys can provide this service
Absolutely.
as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Remember, there's a lot of great information here in this video. Remember to do it for the savings, for the long-term savings, not just because you're looking for a quick return on your investment, because that's not likely to happen to begin with. Make sure you have the correct roof, right? That your roof is less than 10 years old, that you don't have any current hail damage on it. If you're going to make any repairs, do it before you actually install the solar panels. And what else, Josh?
Really, honestly, I think if your bill is in that range, I'd say upwards of $125 a month. If your house, especially if it faces south, the back of your house or the front of your house, if you're okay with panels on the front of your home. On the Missouri side, HOAs cannot restrict solar, right? On the Kansas side, unfortunately, they still can, right?
They can't, okay.
And so on the Kansas side, if the front of your house faces south, unfortunately, the most efficient spot in your home, you can't put panels on, right?
Okay.
But if the back of your house is south, I would love to come and give you guys a free quote and just put together a package for you guys. We call it an apples to apples comparison, right? Your current situation versus what that looks like with solar. We take an educational approach, and so the joke I make is I'm not a dentist. I'm not here to pull teeth, right? I'm here to show you what the numbers are, and if it resonates with you and it makes sense, we'd love to earn your business. But at the end of the day, if it's not a good fit for you, we're totally okay with that. We understand that. Not everybody is a good fit for the program ultimately, right? And we're just interested in helping the ones that are, right?
Okay.
And if we can, we'd love to. That's pretty much all I have. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. This was Josh with Helio GreenTech
Yes.
Solar.
Doesn't have solar on there.
Okay, so Helio GreenTech. So Google him. And what's your phone number, or how can people find you if they want more information?
Yeah, so check us out on heliogt.com to go to our website. Also check us out on Facebook. Just find our Facebook page using the same name. And then my number is 816-945-7245. Feel free to give me a call and set up your next consultation.
Awesome. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope this information was very helpful, and I hope you consider getting solar if you're looking to help save the planet and help save some money on your electric bill. See you guys the next time on The Power Up with your host, Belia Chavez.